So, hello Elyse, this is Elyse calling. Before I start, can I get a quick hands up of anybody who has actually watched I know Kim has actually watched. Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, you don't look that enthusiastic about it, but at least you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so Eurovision. Now, what does Eurovision have to do with politics? Anything? What are the words that we think of when we think of Eurovision?
Sex.
Sex. Okay, that's all right.
Amazing.
All right, that's good.
Wind machine.
Kids, wind machine.
Some block voting.
Block voting, yes, okay, so that's getting a little bit political. Now, I actually think that Eurovision is entirely political. The reason for that is, obviously, it's made up of Europeans from many different countries. They all have their own agendas, nationalist agendas, their own personal agendas, social agendas, and they're all coming together and they're all participating in this activity, and they do it every year. Okay, this isn't like the Olympics where once every 4 years everybody makes nice. This is actually something that happens every year and has done ever since 1956. So Eurovision, I actually think, is like, and I may be being a little bit dramatic, but Eurovision is like the modern day gladiators. Okay, you've got people scantily clad in leather, there are giants, there are dwarves, there's wind in their hair, there is, fire going off in the background. It's all very exciting and it's all meant to get us all excited and all provoke that sort of response of, that passionate response that we have for different nations. So the reason that Eurovision came about was, in 1955, a group of blokes, and I imagine they're blokes only because it was 1955, and let's be honest, it was probably men, and they got together and they decided that they wanted to use the good of television and radio in order to unite and heal Europe after both the World War I and II. So they thought long and hard, and what they came up with was to pit different countries against each other in a competition based on sort of national pride. They thought this would be a good idea, this is how we'll bring us all together. But you know what, it actually kind of worked. And the reason I say it worked is because it's still going. We haven't fought any wars about Eurovision, and if anything, it's shown that we can all work together. We can appreciate each other. We have things in common, and we'll get to that voting in blocks in a minute. But we have things in common, and we can appreciate, all those sorts of things. Now, okay, so officially speaking, though, Eurovision is not a political forum, and musicians and also their songs are not supposed to have any sort of political message or content. But again, this is made up of people. This is not an abstract theory. These are people who have their own thoughts and opinions. So obviously, this is going to happen. Now, what started with 6 different member nations quickly turned into, you can see here as we're going along, all the different countries as they joined Eurovision. The reason I wanted to bring this up is because I wanted to stop at 1973, because if we're going to talk politics, you may as well bring Israel into it. Now, I spend a lot of time trying to import my enthusiasm for Eurovision on others. Sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't. And my Euro noobs often, well, particularly the ones who pay attention, say to me, why is Israel there? Are they lost? Do they not own a map? What's going on with Europe? And I say, well, actually, the reason that Israel is there is because the people who created this, the European Broadcasting Union, I call them EBU because we're friends. So EBU actually decided that if you have, within their range, there's all sorts of, longitude and latitude that comes into it. But if you're in range and you broadcast their program, then you can actually participate. There are different zones and things like that because it gets political. But Israel and the top of, all of North Africa actually, are entitled to be a part of Eurovision. So Israel joined up, and unfortunately, the other Arab states such as Jordan or Tunisia or, Jordan. Did I say Jordan?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm struggling. Thank you. That's what I was thinking. So they don't participate because of Israel. So with many of them, they actually have very strict laws in their country about not acknowledging the state of Israel. So therefore, they cannot play or broadcast the Eurovision Song Contest. So now, again, this was Jordan tried to be a little bit tricky, and Jordan said, you know what, the lure of Eurovision is too strong, we want to be a part of this, we're going to broadcast. And they did, and they happened to do so in 1978. Now, what happened in 1978 is that, Israel kind of won. And what Jordan had done was when Israel was actually on, they just put up just a shot of flowers, as though it wasn't happening, as though in the middle of Eurovision. I mean, it's cheesy and sometimes things don't make sense, but I think you'd notice that a still shot of flowers doesn't belong. But when they realised that Israel was in fact going to win during the voting process, they then cut the feed. And in all of the official newspapers in Jordan, in 1978, Belgium won. Okay? Don't ruffle any feathers. But the European Broadcasting Union said you can't do that. If you want to be a part of Eurovision, you have to accept it, one in, all in. And that's the reason why, unfortunately, at this point, most of the North Africa still doesn't participate. So as you can see, as we move down into the 90s, we have the end of the Cold War. And as the Cold War ended, we have a lot of melting of all of the different Eastern European countries into the Eurovision Song Contest program. Now, they brought with them some enthusiasm because, frankly, Eurovision was becoming a little bit stale. But the Eastern Europeans brought a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of spandex. Perhaps too much spandex. But it happened, and they're here. And to this day, they actually take it very seriously. I don't know how many of you know about last year. Russia and Azerbaijan got into some very serious talks about the fact that votes had gone missing, and it's one of these things that in these Eastern Europe countries, communism didn't work out the way they wanted. They really want to participate now, they want to be good, and when they're on a national stage in any sense, it's important to them that they do well. So they take Eurovision very seriously. And Russia, had some very serious talks with Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan promised to never do it again. Because although it's political, no one is going to go to war over Eurovision. So as much as people can take it seriously, it's always going to be just Eurovision. It's just people on a stage with a wind. I'm sorry, Kim. It's just people on a stage with a wind machine. And so it brings people together and has them working together and enjoying each other, but at the same time, not that serious. If things don't work out, we'll move on. And in fact, interestingly enough, one of the major issues they had with Eurovision is the rules. Obviously, they have to constantly flow and adapt to the rules because of more countries, how do we vote, with new technologies, what's the processes that we're going to have, and they're actually very fluid about it, and they try something, if it doesn't work, they go back. For example, you had to sing in one of the actual official languages of your country. Then they changed it. Nah, if you want to sing in English, go ahead. Then they changed it back. No, it has to be one of your official languages. And they've gone backwards and forwards several times, and no one seems to that worried about it. If something's not working, they change it. And they had a situation in 1964 where they had a 4-way tie for first place, which is a bit awkward. What was even more awkward is that the next year, 4 countries actually boycotted Eurovision because they were still very upset about it. Not one of those 4 countries had been in the top 4. They were in no way, they had no chance of actually placing at all, but they still got mad, and so they stormed off. Okay, so that's the sort of the bigger country versus country thing, but obviously in having individuals coming together and performing, they're going to bring their own personal sort of attitudes to this as well. Now, this one in the middle is the one I want to talk about again. It's from last year, so this is Finland's entry. And she actually kissed a woman on stage. Now, the reason that she did it was as a stand to her own countries. They hadn't passed gay marriage laws, and she wanted to sort of protest against that. But we've talked about it, Eurovision is not supposed to be about political messages. And considering the broad group of people, some of whom are quite conservative, the fact that she actually did this raises some issues. This is all of Europe coming together. We've agreed not to get political because we don't want to upset anybody. And yet, she did it. She did it anyway. People talked about it, and then we moved on with our lives. So it kind of proves that you can be very live and let live about these things, especially when it comes to Eurovision. So some of the other notable ones are, of course, up the top there we have another Finnish entry. They just like to promote. Everybody was quite shocked that they won with their death metal band, but you know what? It was something different. They were trying something, and everybody thought they'd give them a whirl, and that's what happened. Romania up the top there, which was very disturbing for anybody who watched last year. Now this one here, down on the bottom, this is actually Georgia, and in 2009, Georgia had a song which was called "We Don't Want No Put In." Now, this was deemed to be far too close to We Don't Want No Putin, and considering in the actual video clip they shoot themselves in the head and all these sorts of things, so they decided that unless you change your lyrics, you have to go. And they chose to leave. So again, although they couldn't participate in the way that the Finland had, they still got their message across because all of Europe was a buzz. Did you see what happened to Georgia? Should that be allowed? What about free speech? And interestingly enough, we have down here in the front, sometimes things get through because this is Israel's 2007 entry. Their song was Push the Button, and it was all about pushing the button on a nuclear explosive device and blowing us all to bits in various different fashions, which apparently no one thought was a problem. So it's interesting. Don't kiss a woman, but if you want to push the button, go ahead. Now, let's talk about voting blocks. Voting blocks are something that, obviously they're part and parcel with Eurovision, and as I said, I think that Eurovision is political. It makes sense that people from close proximity to each other, who have similar cultures, who have similar languages, would vote together because they appreciate the same kind of thing. The thing to also consider in Eurovision is that countries that have a lot of their population moving, particularly in this globalised world that we live in, when you have people living outside and they can therefore vote for the country that they were born in, you're going to get some people, they're not playing the game the way they should. So that's something that really affects the Eurovision voting as well. But one of the biggest complainers is, surprise, surprise, England. And the English are actually becoming quite bitter about this, in obviously the news that I read, which is about Eurovision. But at the same time, they have sent Engelbert Humperdinck and Bonnie Tyler, and really, we're talking about igniting people's passions, not warming up their Horlicks. So if you want to be a contender, I think you really have to bring a little bit more on this. And then, so the other thing about Eurovision is it has to be about something more than the music and the people who are the actual talent that comes out of Eurovision. Because frankly, even though it's been going since 1956, really there are very few people who you actually would know. I mean, there's ABBA, which we all know. There's Celine Dion, who represented Switzerland in 1998, 6, one of those. It was an even number. Or 89, one of them. And then we have down here, this is actually Gina G. I don't know if any of you know the song Ooh Ah Just a Little Bit, Ooh Ah a Little Bit. Ah, there she is! So that's who she is. And really you can tell that after that many years with those many performances, you really should have a bit more. And although every year in Europe the winner is, obviously they get a bit of success, they get a bit of airtime, people do get excited about it, long-term success, well, Eurovision's not your track to that. So if you're not watching it necessarily for the music, there has to be something more. And I do think it's about the fact that you are getting together, you're bonding, you get to hear and appreciate music in different languages, and have a giggle at each other, because everybody likes to see someone fall on their face, and it happens. You can guarantee it every year. So the thing I would put to you is, I cannot imagine Australia being in a situation where we would have any kind of Asia vision. I don't think that Australians would necessarily be interested in watching performances in a language other than their own. And I think that it would be a very interesting experiment, but a very expensive one. But I, for one, would vote for that. So that's all I have to say about Eurovision.